This is 55 TV, and we're at the Brian Duffy exhibition with his fantastic son Chris. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well, thank you, yes.
It must be quite an emotional process to go through all this work and put it together on behalf of your father.
Well, I've been working on it for about 4 years, so I've kind of grown with it. I feel very close to it because I worked for Duffy for a few years from 73 to 79, so there's a certain amount of work that I've got a direct connection with. But yeah, I suppose it is emotional.
Your father was particularly in the background with things, especially with the press, and do you think he really saw himself as an artist or just somebody that worked with photography and worked with the subject matter that he was involved in?
I think he saw himself in period as a tradesman, really. I mean, he was a brilliant technician. He understood lighting, lenses, set building. He was technically brilliant. I think these days people look at photographs from a certain period and they've become art. 15 years ago, 20 years ago, nobody really considered photography. It's a very recent kind of thing that's happened. So when he was shooting these pictures, it was just another job. I don't think he went out in the morning and thought, I'm going to go and create a piece of art. You know, maturation time has turned them into kind of iconic pieces, but in period, I doubt, well, I know he wouldn't have gone out and thought that they were anything different or special from the thing he did the day before.
Sure. Do you think his contemporaries at the time had a different idea of themselves as photographers and more kind of celebrity than your father did?
Oh, I think everyone takes a different position, really, and they get into it for different reasons. I think Duffy, life is, in many respects, all about timing. Bailey, Duffy and Donovan were of a period. They were in the right place at the right time when, this embryo of cultural explosion happened in the 60s, and they were right in the middle of it. I mean, Duffy always said to me, if you could count the amount of people in the 60s who made the difference on two hands, there was very few people. Now everyone's, we're in the celebrity period, aren't we, where everyone's famous for 15 minutes. But I think the 60s was a small kernel of eclectic, talented people. So Bailey had a different view on it, Donovan had a different view, Snowden had they approached it from different angles.
I want to ask you a question about Duffy and his work.
Yeah.
Fashion or celebrity? Fashion is exceptionally hard to do. You construct a lot of images, not just one.
Sure.
Why did he fall into it, and which one do you think he preferred, or if any?
Fashion, Duffy started off as a dress designer, so he had an intrinsic understanding of how a dress was made. He always said the important thing in fashion photography was that you had to show the dress, which is a difficult thing because if you've got someone moving, you're fighting against obviously the design and getting a feeling into the photograph. I think one of the important things that he always tried to imbue in a fashion photograph was that he always felt that the model should look, and I think they did in period, look like they owned the clothes. So whereas today you've got 14, 15, 16-year-old models, they're really kind of clothes horses. You put the sun, they stand, they look great, but there's no kind of spontaneity or experience coming out of them. So yeah, I think he understood how a dress should work, he understood design, and he understood how to get the best out of a person. He always kind of imbued a sense of fantasy into the shoot. He'd get them to think about being someone or doing something, role-playing, and I think all those elements came together very well. I mean, it's interesting, my favourite, and I think one of his favourite, and I know Helmut Newton called him up and said it was the best picture he'd seen in a long, long time, was the photograph of the three models in red with their heads covered by a tree, which is quite, crazy to do, isn't it? You get top hair and makeup artists, and then you get great models, and you stick their heads behind a tree branch. I mean, it's quite anarchic, but that was his style, and it worked beautifully.
He was kind of seen to be lack of ego, but he had a strength with his subject. He's quite stern and quite hard to work with, it's renowned. How was he to be with work, because you worked with him, and being a family member? What's the side on that?
Very difficult. I mean, he was...
Must be exceptionally difficult to be a family member and to work with him, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we always had that separation between family and business. When you're an assistant, you've got a job to do, and that's that. But as a person, he didn't suffer fools lightly at all. He was, I mean, as Bailey said, he's the most intelligent person he'd ever met. His brain was absolutely phenomenal. And that's one of the things, actually, that I find very difficult. When you look at the photographs, you're looking at a moment in time, and Duffy created them, and you can put them up against other photographs and compare them. But the element that's really missing is understanding, unless you knew the person, how his brain worked. And he was more than a photographer, he was an extraordinary mind. But I think he applied, he got bored with things very quickly, and he wanted to challenge himself. He always said the photographs that interested him the most were pictures that he'd look at that he didn't quite understand how the photographer achieved that image. And I think that is the unique magic of metaphysical photography, photomechanical photography, where you capture, I mean, a Cartier-Bresson is not half a second before or half a second after, it's that moment, and that's the dynamic that traditional photomechanical photography deals with, and that's what interested him. And I mean, he'd do crazy things. He always pushed he was always ahead of the curve on anything, and sometimes that's difficult to be ahead. Probably to be more successful, you should be just behind the wave. But he always challenged himself. I mean, one of his favourite cameras was, I say a homemade camera. It was a hodgepodge of a Cambo 5.4 body. He had special plates made to adapt to different roll film backs. All the lenses were off different cameras, and so he was kind of just very inventive, very forward thinking in his approach.
Great, it's really good to talk to you. We're going to have a look around the exhibition. Thanks for inviting us down, and we'll catch up with you in the future. This is 55 TV. This is Chris Duffy.